welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we've got another excellent episode for you in the form of a conversation with Adam McDaid, who shot Everything's Trash, along with a bunch of other great stuff, honestly. We talk about that show, which is a funny, really well-shot show, dealing with studio notes. There's some camera stuff in there, all the usual good stuff for a Frame and Reference episode. So I know you guys are going to enjoy this one, so please get to it. Here's my conversation with Adam McDaid. Make sure I don't have boogies. Yeah, that's the one thing is like, I'm hoping that... No, we're fine. Let's not talk about it anymore. Okay. Video version. So tell me how you got started as a creative. Were you always, interested in images, or was there like some other path that you thought you were going to take before you got into cinematography, or kind of what was that starting matriculation?
Yeah.
Is that the right word? How'd that go?
Yeah. It's, I know I was always very into movies, ever since I was a little kid. I had some like really specific memories. One was like I was 6 and my mom took me to see The Black Stallion. And when the movie was over, I was inconsolable. I just was crying. I was super upset. I really was into the film. I was very much into the world. And my mom did the coolest thing ever. She took me to the box office. We bought another ticket and we watched it again. And that's like the only way she could chill me out. So I don't know, that's like kind of like something that like sticks out in my mind is like an early memory of loving films. But, as a kid, I was always super visual. I was always getting in trouble for daydreaming and staring out the window. I drew a lot of pictures, but in all honesty, like I didn't really start to receive a formal education in photography until I was 27. I did a lot of other stuff in my life before I was a cinematographer. I drove my mother crazy. I didn't go to college right away. I supported myself since I was 18. You name it, I've done it. I pumped gas. I was a trash man. I worked in the environmental movement. And my big creative outlet was punk rock, actually. And I played in a band in Seattle in like the late 90s and early 2000s. And basically my band broke up and I got very depressed because that was my main creative outlet. And my wife and we had gone on a trip that summer and we were traveling. And I really thought long and hard, about like, what do I do next? And I had this journal and I was in this town called Vernazza in Cinque Terre, and I still have the journal. I wrote in capital letters, I'm going to be a cinematographer. I just really thought about it that, I've always loved film. I never saw myself being able to sit at a desk or have like a straight job, like a real job. So that's kind of where it began. My first photography class was at Seattle Central Community College when I was 27 years old. And, I was in an associate's program because there was a direct transfer agreement to the University of Washington. And I did some research and I was like, oh, AFI seems like a cool school and it's super intensive.
Seems like it.
They produced a lot of cinematographers. And I liked that it was a conservatory and I was there just to, study this craft. And that was it, man. I just kind of set my sights on that goal of like wanting to pursue cinematography with the clear goal of going to AFI. And I transferred into the University of Washington from Seattle Central, and they didn't have a film program. So the next best thing I could do was cinema studies and comparative literature. And then I had a work study job in the digital arts program, and which gave me access to DVX 100s and Final Cut Pro. And I literally said to myself, I was like, all right, man, you got 3 years to make a reel. And that's what I did, man. I worked really, really hard. Having done all of these jobs like pump gas and been a trash man and played punk rock, like I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do. So I took school very seriously, and long story short, I got an interview at AFI. I had a really good interview. They later told me, they rolled the dice on me, that I was like a bit of the wild card. I think Eric and I were probably like the least experienced because Eric spoke about a lot of people from AFI come from the professional world, or they come straight out of a proper film school like NYU or UCLA or whatever. But yeah, so I had a very non-traditional route, and I guess like the main thing was like I was always visual. I'd always loved movies. I love telling stories, and yeah, I think I answered your question.
Yeah. No, it's there's so many jumping off points. First, I a lot of people have come on this podcast and been like, oh yeah, I was making movies as a kid, Super 8 camera or DV or whatever. Went to film school early. But to your point about starting later than most, I've said, not on this podcast, I don't think, but a million times, like, I really wish I went to college later. There's a bunch of stuff that I'm glad I did. Like, I'm glad I went to college as a young person because I got to do dumb shit that like I wouldn't even attempt doing if I was like 25 or older. But yeah, talk to me about like what being in college like with potentially younger peers was like, and like if that taught you anything besides just like
Yeah.
putting your nose to the grindstone at that time.
Yeah, I was a pain in the ass in high school. Like, I got bored really easily. There were only there were only a few things that really interested me. And, having gone back to school at 27 and having like such a focus, I was a serious student. Like, I took it seriously. Like, I was really into the classes, and, I took my paper seriously. I watched everything. I read everything. And I had some classmates around me, and I felt like the old dude, but in context, I was only like maybe, 6 years older than some of these people. But I don't know, like, I think it just gave me, more of a purpose and more of a focus, and maybe having a little bit more life experience. I don't know, maybe I was able to bring little something more to the experience of both undergrad and also AFI, in the filmmaking of just maybe being a little bit more well traveled, just being a little bit more experienced, a little bit older. But I would like to think that the experience helped me.
Well, I mean, anytime you were assigned, I'm assuming,
Mm.
anytime you were assigned a make a film, it was probably at least somewhat interesting instead of what is it usually that they told us at New York Film Academy. It was like character with one red rose goes outside, beats up a homeless person, finds a briefcase full of cocaine. There's a hitman somewhere. It's like there was like a list they gave us of like, these are the things you're not going to do. And I remember
Yeah,
going like, why not? And they're like, every single one of you have the same
yeah,
brain. You're dumb
yeah,
16-year-olds.
yeah. It's definitely, I think back to like my early films, and they're pretty bad. There's definitely, but you can't help, but be sort of derivative or like influenced, by the films that, you were passionate about and that got you excited about filmmaking in the first place, at least for me, like the film that I think they told me like really that they liked on my reel, it's basically like a color noir, film noir, but there are these like freaky twins at a ticket booth, and I don't know if it's David Lynch, whatever, but whatever. There were maybe some evocative images that helped get me an interview. So
Sure. Now,
yeah,
you had mentioned Eric. That's Eric Koretz for those who are
yes,
listening.
sorry, Eric Kretz, yeah.
Well, we were having that conversation before. But what was just because people who listen to this podcast will have heard that interview. What was your guys' relationship like? Because you were in the same class. We've had plenty of people who went to AFI in the same time, but I don't think anyone was in the same class.
Yeah. Eric and I were close, and we were friends and hit it off. And like I said, I early in our conversation, I sat next to him in our Friday night analysis class with Bill Dill, and I just marveled at the way he took notes because he was an illustrator and a graphic designer before he was a cinematographer. And the way he took notes, it looked like a graphic novel, it looked like a comic book. And I was just like, "Fuck, what is up with this guy? This guy's interesting." And yeah, I don't know. We just sort of hit it off, and his work was unique and inspired, just like a lot of my classmates were. So yeah, it was it was a tight bond, I guess, like just to speak generally of the cinematography program, because
Right.
like Eric mentioned in the other podcast, we all had to crew for each other, so it's 7 days a week. You're in class Wednesday through Friday, you're on set Saturday through Tuesday, and that I don't know, it's just there's a camaraderie there that struck, and I'm friends with all of these people still, and we had each other's backs during cycle films, our first year films, and on our thesis films, and helped each other out in our early careers. And so yeah, I don't know, it's of all the disciplines, I think the cinematographers were probably the closest, because we just simply spent the most time together, and we were the most collaborative, maybe. I don't know, but yeah, Eric and I got along really well, and I just was really inspired by Eric's work.
Did either of you teach each other something that you can recall at that time, or maybe a lesson you learned
Um,
collaboratively?
Try to remember. God, it was a long time ago. We graduated 16 years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe just a fight you both got in.
no, no, it was never like that. We always had a good time, and we just made each other laugh. And I do remember his thesis film in particular. He made this really good thesis film. I forget the name of the title, but the director is a really accomplished director now, Zalbat Manjili. And it was something that we learned from Bill Dill, is when the director calls cut, make sure your first AC doesn't cut the camera until you say cut. Because sometimes the most interesting things can happen when they think the camera stops rolling. Like a moment of humanity can be revealed, something like that. But in a in another context, it was actually the pre-roll and the end roll. And I remember their editor, this guy named Mike Darrow, they used the pre-roll and end roll as edit points in the film. And the film was playing with time. And I don't know, I just remember like being struck by that and just thinking, I don't know, maybe Eric thought about that lesson from Bill, and maybe that was just sort of this thing that evolved in the edit between the director, editor, and the cinematographer from this like little uh, simple idea that was articulated to us.
That's. Do you edit at all?
I used to like I occasionally will like cut a reel and stuff, but yeah, I used to edit all the time.
So it's such a simple thing, but now that you mention it, like that was, I don't know when it was ingrained in me, but I actually turn off the tally light on all of my cameras
Mm,
because yeah, for that exact reason, because I want that chunk at the beginning and that chunk at the end where you can steal a few seconds or so,
yeah,
maybe a reaction, or maybe when they chill, or maybe when they look up. There's just like little
totally.
things that aren't, you know when we went to ASU, they taught us what they called ethics based filmmaking. So
Hmm.
you want to make sure you're using a clip that the actor wouldn't think like, what the fuck, that's just me.
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
those little seconds before and after, I think, are ethically okay to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a great point. Really valuable time in those pre and post roll.
Yeah, and like and also too, there was a commercial director I worked with a long time ago, and we're still friends, and I'd never heard the term 50-50 before. And it's just something you can say very nonchalantly on set, 50-50, when you're working with people that aren't, say, professionally trained actors. And then sound and camera all know to roll the camera, to kind of just steal these moments that are just um, just more open and unaware that something's being recorded. And I do the same thing, actually, like you said. I make sure the tally light is not off for that same reason, because they'll see the light go off, and that's it, like performance over.
Yeah, totally. You had mentioned creating a reel,
Hmm.
and we've talked about reels before on this podcast, but they clearly were useful in the past. Do you think they're still relevant, or do you think you might as well just go out and make a project? Because that's the advice I've heard these days. But I wish reels were useful.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for me, early on, reels were important, just because my early work coming out was short form. It was mostly short films. I didn't have bigger projects or for commercial stuff. Like I didn't have big brands or anything like that. So for me early on, I think reels were good in terms of just kind of showing range. I think things are a lot different for cinematographers coming out now, or coming up now, because, there was no Vimeo, there was no Instagram. You couldn't shoot 4K on a phone. So yeah, I don't know. It was helpful for me. I certainly see plenty of reels still. For me, I just put up complete projects at this point, in my career, and that's just because of where I'm at.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're important.
Do you maybe have some insight as to how someone can get past the point of only doing short form and sort of needing a reel to the point of being able to being able to
Yeah.
just post those full commercials and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, honestly, I've learned over the years, it's ultimately, it's not the bigger projects or branded projects that get you noticed, but more often than not, it's the personal projects.
Mm.
Like I think ways where you can do something where you can like really sort of express yourself the way, that you want to express yourself visually, or how you like to make images or tell stories. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, in my own experience, I first got signed 11 years ago, and the project that got me signed was something I made on my iPhone 4 when I had insomnia. I was recently moved to New York, and I'd never had insomnia before. And rather than staring at the ceiling, I would go for walks when the sun was rising. And I just started shooting video on my camera, and like figured out a way to import it into Final Cut, and like, I don't know, threw like explosions in the sky track or something under it. And Walter Partos at the Partos Company, which isn't around anymore, saw that. Like I sent him my stuff, and he was like willing to meet with me, but he's like, "You working on anything interesting?" I was like, "Well, I had insomnia, and I made this weird film on my phone." And I showed him that, and that's what got me my first representation. And I didn't really have much of a reel to speak of back then. It wasn't nearly as whatever accomplished, and but whatever, it got my foot in the door. They saw something creative. They helped me get my first big commercial director to collaborate with, and that just kind of like got the ball rolling. And it didn't change anything. It just maybe, like I said, got my foot in the door, and I just need to start working harder and keep hustling. But I
Yeah.
guess I don't know, I get distracted easily, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I think it's the personal projects. I think it's the personal projects that I've made, that have gotten the most notice, like not the big branded stuff. Like one of the projects I'm most proud of, or two of them, were these, a music video I shot in Haiti, and then this short doc that I did, here in New York, about a dance crew on subway trains. And that came out of nowhere. Like that came from like Vimeo and Instagram. And still, like, these projects that aren't for anything except for, me and the director, is what, helped me book bigger jobs. Like, I know that this one job, that one project is called The Next Stop. I know that was instrumental in me booking my first studio job that I just wrapped,
Mm.
in July. So it's weird, man. There's no sort of rhyme or reason to a career. I used to waste a tremendous amount of time, worrying about it or comparing myself where I was to other cinematographers,
Yeah.
instead of just staying, focused on making stuff. Always be shooting, like just always like work to form new collaborations and always make stuff. um and just be prepared, like eventually, something's going to happen, like you're going to catch a break. And when you get that opportunity, like hopefully, you're ready for it. And, you're experienced enough, and you bring all that skill and experience with you.
Yeah. What is it? Opportunity is luck plus preparation.
Hmm.
I think that's the phrase. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's funny you mentioned like the personal projects and stuff, because it does feel like I've heard shadows of that type of advice before, and it's funny how the risks that you take that get you in the door are then quashed in generally in the name of safety on set. Not literal safety, but like don't get crazy. Let's just light this,
Yeah.
simply and
Yeah.
and get fucking check out here.
No, I definitely learned that on the show I just finished. Everything's trash. Like it was, in prep, going for it, and it was a unique opportunity because they'd shot a pilot in LA that got the show greenlit. And the show's very much set in Brooklyn because the star of the show is lived in Brooklyn for 14 years, but everything was shot on a stage, and it felt very inauthentic, because it was on a stage. And I took a gamble. Like when my agent got me the interview for this job, when I put together the deck, like I didn't use references from other works or other films or other photography, like knowing that they were going to start over, bring the show to Brooklyn. Um, what I pitched in my deck was like, let's make Brooklyn a character. And I
Right.
just used my street photography in the deck, and it was just a simple idea. It's like when we're on location, like, let's have the cinematography feel like, it's looking through the viewfinder of a street photographer, and that sort of resonated with them. And, that project, The Next Stop, and then this thing I shot for HBO last year called Pause with Sam J. And we come in with these bold ideas. And yeah, I definitely started getting studio notes, and like we went like a little safer. Let's just say we went
Yeah.
a little safer than maybe what the intent was at the beginning. And not that the work suffers or anything. Like I get it. Like I had to, learn that game, so to speak. But yeah, but still, like I think the show looks rad.
100%. No, and even just like a quick peek at the trailer, and you can see like you guys got some really good work in there that looks. And I actually want to talk a little bit about kind of the lighting of that show a little bit, but
Sure.
I'm wondering if you can, and also some of your commercial work, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on your interaction with the those who give notes and stuff, and what those tend to look like, and how you respond, and kind of where you
Yeah.
mentally make those what do you call it, adjustments, but also when you do something you both want to do. What's that? Not collaboration. What's that word?
Oh,
Whatever.
where
Well, it's collaboration.
or like the idea
Compromise.
is sort of oh yeah, compromise. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it was really so basically me, the supervising director who directed 3 episodes, Sam Tachioka Nasor, our production designer Josh Peterson, and our costume designer Anitra Michelle. Basically the four of us, we all prepped the show together. PD started earlier, designing sets and all of that, but from day one, we were like very much all on the same page in terms of how we visualized the show. So, we're really bold, like trying to make it more cinematic, single source, naturalistic, all of that. And we definitely went that way for the most part. I mean, obviously it's a network show. Like, people can't be in half light, like whatever. It can't be as contrasty as maybe as I would like sometimes. So yeah, so basically, we shot the first episode in March, and then we had a 2.5 week prep period for episode two. And during that time, we presented the edit to the studio, and yeah, and they come back with notes basically, and and for the most part, they were good. They were like they loved what we were doing. The whole reason that they brought the show to Brooklyn was for it to be was for Brooklyn to be a character, to make the show feel as real as possible, and ultimately, it comes down to the showrunner and the studio, and they're just like, faces need to be a little brighter. It's a comedy. Like, although it is a dramedy, and there's some dramatic aspects to it, we need to see them. Like, it's comedy. There's certain things that just need to be seen that allows the jokes to hit, and I got it, and it wasn't a challenge. I mean, I guess it was a little bit of a challenge in that this is like probably like the most I've ever lit anything in my life. I tend more towards naturalism, and I still think the show looks very naturalistic. So it was just like an adjustment period. Basically me and my gaffer, we came up with a lighting plan, and we just sort of adjusted for those notes, and just made sure that we heard them, because ultimately,
They're
they're
signing the
they're
check.
they're signing the check. They've hired us to do a job, and um, I made mistakes early in my career where I wasn't as collaborative, and that's ultimately going to just cause you problems. So, it being my first studio job, like I'm going to be like, yeah, of course, no problem. But it wasn't a problem. It was figuring out the language of a show.
Yeah.
We had all these ideas that we came up with in prep to how to tell the story visually. Create a visual grammar to tell a good story. Um, and you get notes, and the thing is changing. I mean, it's so nuts. I mean, we were like hanging like the last light, like we're hanging like the last piece of art, like day one of the show. Like, I mean, it's just the schedule was insane. Like, we shot 10 episodes in 53 days. And
Damn.
yeah, it's a super ambitious schedule. And so you just sort of adjust, it evolves, and then eventually like everybody just sort of like, yeah, you learn the language, you take those notes into consideration, the collaboration continues. Josh makes changes to, whatever shades of paint on the wall, and I figure out certain actors take certain quality of light better, like coming up with like various formulas, for actors specifically, for just for their skin tones, like whatever, like um so I don't know, it was never boring and it was never formulaic. um Sometimes it would on the stage because there's hero sets that you're shooting all the time. But it was always fun. It was always challenging. But the most fun was, when we were on location for sure, because I was always presenting a new opportunity to be creative. God,
Yeah.
I'm all over
Well,
the place, Kenny.
no, dude, don't worry about
uh,
like I've said this multiple times, people are here to listen to you, not me. So the more
okay,
you
cool,
go, the better. Otherwise
cool.
I start ranting, which is never good. But to your point about, getting notes and stuff, like, that's also a lesson I had to learn. I remember being in a meeting and telling the person who hired me what we should be doing. I was like, you don't want to do that because that was not. It was a good friend of mine too, and we that was a definite like rift in our friendship for
Oh,
they're about 20 years older than me, but
is it all
so
good? Is it all good now?
I mean, yeah, but not. It's something that both of us remember where like I have no way of articulating like, no, I know better now.
Yeah,
But also getting the notes, like sometimes it's nice to have lines to color within,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
It's less, takes less, puts less on your shoulders.
Sometimes too, I was also learning ways to kind of oh gosh, for lack of a better word, like kind of get my way. Like there was a
Sure.
way where you can figure out a way to have a dialogue and have a discourse, and really I think it's about, sorry, and that, and that mean that, and maybe that sounds selfish, not selfish, I don't mean to be selfish, but you can feel strongly about a certain visual idea, they think is like really important for a show and the character and their arc. And so I guess a big part of it is like listening, being articulate, presenting a strong enough idea and the reasons why. And for me, it's always character, it's always story, it's always emotionally driven, in regards to both the story and the character. So I guess that's a big thing, is like listening, hearing it, hearing your other collaborator, but also making a good argument, a good creative argument, that's passionate and has a reason, and that's the beauty of it, and so it's nice when it's totally collaborative like that, and it's not all on your shoulders, not all up to you, and like you said, like that you have some lines to color within.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, like, you, oh, now I've lost my train of thought. This is why we edit. Um,
Mhm.
oh, the way that I tend to approach those things is I think of it like a coin flip, where I'll go, I'm going to present my idea and their idea as similarly as possible, as neutrally as possible, not to be like, should we make gold or dog shit? You don't want to do that, but just be like, hey,
Yeah,
so I was thinking this, or you'd be like, do we want to do it like this or do we want to do it like that? And then see, if they go, oh, that sounds interesting, you go, cool. And if they go, no, that's horrible, then you go like, all right, great. Because that way,
Yeah.
at least you're not going to bat for something they think is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
And also too, man, just like, early on, like I definitely was a bad collaborator, like I was less skilled as a cinematographer, and something will happen that'll scare you, like you're up against it in terms of schedule, like lights fading, like whatever, and then your ego sort of gets in the way, and I don't know. And then I don't know. It's not as collaborative as it should be, and ultimately it is. It's like the most collaborative art form because, as a cinematographer, it's great. You're working with the director, you're working with actors, you're working with the production designer, costume designer. But, there were definitely opportunities like early in my career, I won't get too into the specifics, but like I shot this Columbia thesis film and the film did really well and like went to the New York Film Festival. And this director is now doing like $40 million movies. We don't work together anymore. So these are things that that are important to a career. We're always learning. We're getting more skilled as technicians, as artists. But also as people. And as collaborators. So for me personally, early on, I made tons of mistakes, and both technically and politically. And luckily, I learned from those, and I stopped falling on my face.
yeah. Well, and something that I've noticed, uh, pretty much everyone, I believe pretty much everyone has agreed with, is early on, it's very easy to get caught up in wanting to try the new thing you've learned or the thing that works because you don't have either a reel or you don't have a resume or whatever. So every project feels like it needs to be perfect. Whereas
Yeah,
when you get further along in your career, if you've done a lot of projects, you're like, this does not need to go, and this doesn't need to go on my website. I can just make this for the person, have a nice time with these nice people, and move
yeah,
on.
absolutely. Absolutely. And also too, like, I mean, it goes back to, the very beginning for me. Like, I mean, I remember my experience at AFI and it was super intense. And we were in this, weird little fishbowl that got dysfunctional at times. And, ultimately, it's the culmination of that experience is your thesis film. And I remember like, me and my, AFI fellows were all like, this is the most fucking important thing we're ever going to make, like
Right.
this is going to make our career, and it's crazy. It's crazy
It
to put
goes
that kind of
college
pressure.
and
Yeah,
then meetings with George Lucas. Yeah.
yeah, and I get it. I get it. Like, we all we all work hard to get to a film school or whatever, or an experience where we have an opportunity to make film, and and I think that just speaks to passion. And then thank God, experience catches up with that passion, and then like you kind of chill out and just kind of go with the flow a little bit more, and just keep being consistent and just do your work every day, and be prepared.
There was definitely a point in my career where reading books on leadership and team management were
Mm,
way more helpful than
mm,
watching special features or getting the next issue of American Cinematographer or a classic book or whatever.
yeah,
That's that. When people say like, oh, it's a lot of managing personalities, it's like, yeah, there's some for anyone listening. Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink, two
mm,
crucial books about managing teams.
mm.
He's a Navy SEAL or ex Navy SEAL. I don't know how they call it. I don't,
Interesting.
you're always a Marine. But yeah, very helps you kill that ego a little bit and also like
Yeah,
delegate.
yeah.
I did want to talk about some of the selected commercials you have on your website look like perfect. They're like perfect, exactly like they look great, but they're also the kind of work that you're gonna get hired to do, and that
Mm.
kind of stuff. Like they're just exactly what high quality work looks like. And I was wondering if you could give some maybe tips on how you're achieving that look, both with lighting and with camera. Like, is camera that important, or is it all lighting? Is it kind of a mix?
Well, for me, it's well, since moving to digital, like I've pretty much only shot Arri cameras. I've been shooting Alexas of the whatever format over the last, decade or so. But for me personally, it's always about lighting. I went to AFI and pre-digital. I was trained on film. All of our first year films were shot on like, shitty Sony like F900s or whatever. And we had like PL mount adapters and no, it wasn't even F900s. It was like standard
No,
def.
that's
Like,
later. Yeah, you're,
yeah,
you're
yeah, it was
thinking like
standard def. It was standard def. It was
EX3,
No, it was
something
even
like.
before that. Like they looked like news cameras basically. But I had a very small reel coming out and I was trained on film. So out of necessity, I had to come up through set lighting. So I was a third, I was a best, I was a gaffer coming up, and I've been a full time cinematographer now for 11 years. So for me, it's always been lighting. I was really fortunate. Back to AFI. I went to school with two great guys that are still really good friends of mine, JP Belliard and this guy, Chad Colmia. Chad was 728 for almost a decade, paid AFI in cash, did like four, yeah, he did like, he saved all his money and like paid in cash. You know, he was on Roger Deakins like crew for like four films. JP went to Northwestern, like lived in LA for a while, was like working lighting. And like those dudes taught me how to light. Like I was the greenest guy. Like I was like, what's a cube tab? Like what's CTS? Like I was so overwhelmed in the beginning of that first semester. And those guys like really taught me how to light. Like they taught me how to run a ring of fire. Like JP got me on this terrible but super fun feature, Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horrors, in between my first and second year of AFI. And I loved it, man. I was getting paid like 125 bucks a day. I was getting killed and I loved it. So yeah, so a big shout out to those guys who taught me how to light in my early days. But yeah, so I came up in lighting, and so for me, I guess it's always been lighting, And as a cinematographer, I think ultimately the only thing you need to know in terms of cameras are lenses. What do different focal lengths offer you in terms of storytelling tools? There's a reason why we have assistant camera people. They know far more about cameras than I do. They really do.
Yeah.
The only thing I can do is DP and operate. I mean, I know the basic menus and all that stuff, but I think ultimately it's lighting, man. Like if you don't know how to light, and if you don't know how to light well, and if you don't know how to light fast, you're not going to work. And don't be daunted by that, because 11 years ago I was super slow. It's just experience. You just have to get that experience. So for me personally, I think it was just learning lighting. The early days were AFI. I'm based in New York now, and when I first moved to New York, I fell in with like the biggest non-union lighting crew, and we were doing the best jobs. Like we were working with Harris Savides and like Darius Kanji, and I was running the
Guys
cable
rule.
and focusing the lights, and like when the work was done, like I'm lurking in the shadows by monitor, like I'm eavesdropping on the conversations, and I was just shooting everything I possibly could. And back then, having an MFA from AFI, because it was still mostly film back then, had a certain cachet, and I was shooting lots of Columbia thesis films on film. So long story short, for me, it's lighting. It's learning just learning my technique, refining my technique. As I've gotten more experience, I think like I'm using less lights. It's become more simplified. I guess a way to say is like elegant is a way. Just like keep it simple. Yeah.
So that's actually fantastic dismount there, because that's exactly what I wanted to get at, was the commercials you have on your site. Maybe barring the Dua Lipa one, but even that is relatively
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Fucking love Dua Lipa. She's fucking rad. He says with
She
a
was
Queens of
cool.
the Stone Age t-shirt on. But talk to me about sort of nuts and bolts, some of those more elegant lighting setups, and kind of like
Okay.
what's getting you those what's not what's getting you those jobs, what's letting you keep those jobs, what can people maybe apply to their own work that'll give them a little bit of a boost?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of narrative is my first love, but the commercial stuff happened more quickly. So that's kind of where I think I'm definitely further along in my commercial career. So I think like the biggest advice I could have is, that I have is, obviously, know how to light well, make producers happy by not over ordering. Like when you go on a scout, like do a proper scout, like make a decision, like, walk into a space, see what it offers you if you're working on location. Um, Figure out the lighting there with your gaffer, order what you need. It's like one of the biggest compliments I'll get from a producer is just like, man, like you never over order. We always wrap on time or early. And I think that's the thing is like, have a vision for what the director wants on the scout. Like, just do your homework with your gaffer and your key grip, and come up with a strong lighting plan and just stick to it. And the more prepared the more prep you can do in terms of with your team and with the director and going into the day. I think the better off you are, the more open you are to moments of inspiration, like things that aren't planned for, just simply by being prepared.
Are you full on the LED train now? Or are you still using traditional lights?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super into LEDs, but I'm also old school. Like I still love tungsten. I still, man, for me, like nothing beats, like, oh my God, here I am, like blanking on the name of the light. Um, Jesus Christ, nine lights, the nine lights, the
Oh,
medium open
the
face.
um,
Um,
the traditional ones, the mole
yeah, the
nine lights.
mall. God,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the nine lights. Yeah. I know. I still love tungsten. Tungsten is great. But no, I love LED as well. Like I definitely have embraced it. Um, you know, uh, it's just they're that sort of in combination with like how sensitive light sensitive sensors are now.
Right.
I mean, LEDs are great, in terms of just being able to do a lot with a little, and be able to like do setups pretty quickly.
Yeah, the one that always comes up is it seems like Astera just has a tube in every DP's pocket. There's they're everywhere now.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's almost becoming like a little cliche. There's the star tube. There's the star tube. It's like we see them everywhere. But no, but they're awesome and they're super practical. And we used them a ton on my show. Like we built like tons of soft boxes with them. Having like the full RGBW. Like the thing that's so beautiful about LED is just having that full spectrum, like both with like, RGB, but then also with, gels and everything else. I mean, the speed it's creating, and also just environmentally, it's awesome.
Yeah, the the Kino Flow LEDs. I went on a little tear and I took my color meter and measured every LED fixture I could find.
Mm,
I think I measured about 30. Might have been more. And it's an ongoing project. I'm trying to build a website where people can just compare like the spectral output and like TLCI and stuff. But I found that those Kino LEDs are damn near perfect. And depending on the setting,
really?
you get about 100 TLCI for certain outputs, which is just insane. But the thing that really changed my life, which is going to sound dumb for people who are like professionals, but I'm on the lower end. We all know this. Was the XY coordinates.
Mm,
Being able to just meter the sun that's coming through the window and punch those numbers into the fixture and it looks
that's crazy.
exactly the same.
It's crazy.
It's
Excuse me.
it's oh it's the best thing in the world. Coming from KinoFlow traditional fixtures or just
Yeah.
like, LED fixtures that only have one color and you gotta like
Yeah.
sit there and do the math on gels and stuff.
Oh
Oh,
my God. Yeah. And like oh God, what was it? The my red shift and all that stuff. And
I don't
yeah, I remember
understand any
those.
of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I remember all that shit. And like, yeah, it's nice, like not having burns on your wrist from like changing scrims and, like cutting gels. Oh my God. Like I spent so much time as a technician, like making, set crates, like, pre-cutting gels, pre-cutting diffusion to like all the different fixture sizes. Yeah. Yeah. LED technology is mind blowing. Yeah,
Yeah.
the fixture I fell in love with, my gaffer fell in love with on my show. I love the Vortex eights, the cream source Vortex
Yeah.
eights.
Cream source is rad.
They're unbelievable. Like I cannot get over like how beautiful and punchy that light is, and all the things you can do with it as a tool.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask, going back to the idea of like commercials versus your show.
Hmm.
Obviously, you're the same DP both times. Are there some examples you can point to where the commercial work basically? Let's see, how do I make this make sense? I'm thinking of like division. Like if you were to take something from your commercial work and how that idea changed to fit what was needed for the show, like something that's kind of the same brushstroke but needed to be adjusted for the show.
Honestly, I think I've never had time or the level of resources like I had on this show being my first studio show. So honestly, like the biggest adjustment for me was just like, wow, just to suddenly have like just this incredible wealth of resources and and labor, to realize these big ideas that you can have, like visual ideas for a show or a lighting setup, and actually, being able to execute it. I had a um, shit, I guess. Okay, sorry to get back to it. So, like, well, in commercials and stuff, like, I think ultimately too, you have to be really fast. Like, you have an impossible
Right.
schedule every day. You have like, they want you to just do 20 setups in a day with like with like three location moves, like whatever. So all of that experience was totally invaluable. I think the fact that I was an electrician and a best and a gaffer was super helpful as well. Um, it's part of the reason why producers like me is like, having been a gaffer, like I only order what I need. So I definitely think like that experience of those commercial works, of all those commercial jobs that just have crazy, crazy schedules, perfectly transitioned into television, because television feels a lot like commercials in a way. Like my lightest page count on Everything's Trash was 5 pages. We were shooting 7 pages a day sometimes, like we were shooting
Damn.
8 pages a day sometimes. So it was great. I think that experience that I brought with me in the commercial world, my experience in having come up through set lighting, and most importantly, like rolling with my team, like, nothing without my camera grip and electric department, and there's a lot of people I've been collaborating with for years. And it is really collaborative. Like I've learned so much from them, and hopefully sometimes they learn something from me. But it's definitely, it was sick. Like I had a wealth of experience, I had the wealth of experience of my collaborators as well. Um, and I was very collaborative with them from the beginning, in terms of like what the goal of the show was visually. I tried to be super inclusive with them as well. Like we're making this together. Like I'm the DP, but this is like we're doing this. So yeah, so I don't know, man. It was just like sort of this perfect little storm of timing and experience. It took me. I made the decision 22 years ago to pursue this, and it took me 22 years to get my first studio job. Um, and it's nice that I got the opportunity when I did, um, because I had the experience to pull it off.
Yeah.
To shoot 10 episodes in 53 days, to be the only DP. Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome.
Well, and I wanna highlight for people listening that like 22 years to get your first studio job isn't like 22 years to success.
Yeah,
I would argue you succeeded far long earlier, but that's just the
yeah,
first studio job. That's all. I think
yeah.
when you get enough experience, you realize they're all just different jobs, but some of them are fancier.
No, and I think that's such a good point. I think that's such a good point, because like ultimately, we're doing this because we love to make images, right? And every project is important. You learn from everything, and to go back to what I said earlier about making mistakes, comparing myself to other cinematographers. Like I caused myself like an unbelievable amount of grief early on in my career. There's no rhyme or reason to a career. Every project is an accomplishment and is a success. And, and even when it's not, you take from that, you learn from that, you take it to the next project. So yeah, so I'm glad you made that point. Yeah. It's, yeah, every time you, every shot is an accomplishment, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like every
I wanted
setup is an accomplishment sometimes, you know?
100%. I wanted to ask, what you were saying, you had all the resources you could want, but you only order what you need. What are some of those things that maybe you've seen or heard other DPs ordering that you're like, you don't need that? What are some of those fancy things that we don't need?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's that specific. I think it's like it's not, maybe I can't name a specific lamp or anything like that.
I was gonna
But
say the gimbal. I
okay,
always
yeah,
get.
yes,
Can we get
yes.
a
Okay.
gimbal? Why? Just we need it.
Yeah, I just booked a commercial, and a gimbal is in the creative deck, of course. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think what it is sometimes like over ordering, um, dumping the truck, just puking the truck completely, heading up every lamp, um, redoing lighting setups, as opposed to, again, take the time, look at the location, figure out the shots, figure out what you need. Shit, you may not even need to light this shot because there's enough natural light coming through this window at this time of the day in the schedule.
Yeah.
And simply making that decision frees up your crew to pre-light the next deal, the next set.
Yeah.
So I think what it is, I mean, if you have everything, if you have a truck full of stuff and you're just puking it every time and you're not making a decision, you're just creating like a bigger ball on a chain that's slowing down you and your team and the show.
Yeah.
Does that
Well,
does
it's
that make
it's
does that make sense?
100%. Of the analogy I was gonna make was like sometimes you'll order 8 lenses and you really needed 2, 3.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you're sitting there
Yeah,
faffing around with them, and it just wastes time.
yeah.
You had mentioned a while ago about lighting different skin tones, and I was wondering, that something that's been talked about a little bit more in the past, 5 years or so. But
Hmm.
any sort of things you learned or maybe had to figure out coming into this show that you could share with people on like tips, on lighting darker versus lighter skin tones.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. No, like there definitely has been a lot about it, written about it, and honestly, my approach is really the same. Like, I don't know, like I just sort of like was still lighting to eye, um, making sure that the exposure was like in a certain area in terms of like false color, IRE. I think the big difficulty that I face sometimes in this particular experience was, everybody was exposed properly, and like I was lighting, yeah, whatever. I had a look or a vision in mind to like, still make them look beautiful, still make everybody look good, but still like hold on to a sense of naturalism and motivated sources.
Mm.
My biggest problem was, or challenge was, I created a LUT for the show. Like I shot a bunch of camera tests and we created a LUT. And sometimes that LUT doesn't work in every single situation. Is only like
Yeah.
maybe a 75% approximation of what the image will be. So there were times where on the monitor, because the LUT was being outputted to all the monitors, and not all of those monitors were calibrated properly. I had people coming up
Right.
to me saying like, yo, they're underexposed. Like this looks dark, and I could only geek out so much of like, 40 IRE and blah, blah, blah. And like, here's the log C and like, look at the, false color. Ultimately, like some people aren't as technical as us. So it's, yeah, that became problematic, where like not understanding that the LUT is no reflection of the digital negative in terms of what we're actually recording,
Yeah.
so I don't know, like I think I just always light by eye. I didn't have any special sauce, so to speak. I think there were just some actors where just like certain combinations of light, um, and it wasn't even skin tone. Like maybe it was just like, some people took harder light better, some people took softer light better. So it wasn't necessarily about level of exposure. Maybe it was just sort of the quality of light that I was throwing on them. And that was like part of the language that like me and my gaffer had to learn, because we all met these people for the first time on day one of 101.
Right.
And over those 6 days, that kind of became sort of our proving ground to evolve our technique and approach with each actor as we got to know them.
Sure. Totally. Yeah. Because it's easy nowadays. I was just talking about this with the last person I interviewed, which won't be the last podcast people listen to. But
Hmm.
hard light started to come back. We were in
Yeah.
soft light central for like 30 years, and now we're finally
Yeah.
starting to get hard light again.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of
It's
cool. It's kind of cool. Like I used a shitload of park cans on my show. It was partly out of necessity because the grid was so low at our stages. So my gaffer and I had to like figure out a daylight look. So yeah, anyway, I used a shitload of park cans on my show
yeah.
for for daylight.
Have you ever used the CRLS or any of those like reflector systems? This is
I
completely out
haven't
of left
got
field.
I haven't gotten into those. Have you?
No, and I every time I try to get a hold of them, they're slippery. Like, because I write for ProVideo Coalition, so I'm like, let me borrow them, write a review, like let's figure this out.
Okay.
And I got sent their office for like their distributor or whatever is like right down the street from me, and I went over there, and it's like the same guy who does BB&S lighting, which they make great lights,
Okay.
those like phosphor lights.
Yeah.
But he just sat there and told me how dope BB&S was, and no other light would look good in the CRLS. And then this is like 2 hours, and then as I was leaving, I was like, "So do I get to borrow a kit?" And he's like, "Oh no, I don't have any." I was like,
What the
"What?
fuck?
Great meeting, bro."
He's just sitting there just telling war stories. He's like, all right, peace out.
100%. That's exactly what
That's
happened. Which
that's funny.
is educational. Um, I really quickly, or maybe not, wanted to jump back to basically the first thing you said about being in a punk rock band, because I
Okay.
have said for the longest time that there's something in music that is cinematography, and
Hmm.
specifically punk, or people say jazz, but there's certain bands that kind of ride the line in between them. And I was wondering if there was anything from your music brain that you've kind of can articulate in cinematography, or like anything that sort of seems the same.
I
It's a
mean, I guess
terribly
like
worded question, but
no, no,
I
no.
hope you know
It's
what I
I
mean.
mean, I no, I do. I think, I mean, obviously, you play a song, whether it's jazz or it's like, like I don't know, a hardcore song or whatever, and everything has a time signature, everything has a tempo. And I would say like that applies to camera operating, for sure. Like particularly like maybe, with maybe with Steadicam or like dolly work, and figuring out like the movement and the timing to like what an actor is doing in terms of blocking. So maybe I guess it's like an issue of like I guess you get like as an operator, you have like an internal rhythm to what you're composing to. I think like when it comes to crew, it's kind of like a band. It's like the camera truck, the grip truck, like that's like whatever. That's like the Ford Econo line, and you're in the back of the truck and talking shit and like talking trash about like how the day went and making plans for what the next show is. Our next show. What's the next show? It's the next day of like next day's work. So I guess it's like I don't know. I've also likened it. I mean, I guess punk rock is kind of like being the van is kind of like a pirate ship, and I think you can kind of make that same comparison to a lighting truck or a truck or a camera truck. So I don't know. It feels. Yeah, I feel that camaraderie of like I loved my bandmates and I hated my bandmates and we drove each other crazy. And, I think the same thing can happen with the crew on like day 53 or whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it reminds me of playing in a band in that regard. But I guess ultimately, like if you're trying to make a music analogy, it's just, rhythm, timing, and, feeling things out and having a feel for a song or like having a feel for an actor or a moment. Yeah.
The speaking of Queens of the Stone Age, the analogy that I'm wearing a T-shirt for anyone listening. Just realized. But there was something that Josh Homme said where he was like, Queens is supposed to be hard enough for the boys, but sweet enough for the girls. And I was like, okay, that's probably the one music thing that stuck with me in cinematography for the longest time, because if left
That's
to my
cool.
own devices, I would make everything look like Seven. And that's not, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work for every
Yeah.
gig. You
Yeah.
gotta, especially when you get like a perfume ad or something, you gotta,
Yeah.
make it a little sweeter for the girls, so to speak.
Well, that was. I mean, honestly, for me too. Like, this is my first. I did Pause with Sam J, and it was a non-traditional sort of comedy, and it was very unorthodox in terms of like the way we lit some things. Like, there were some cinematic elements to it, but like this is like the first straight comedy I've ever done. Like, I've never done a comedy before. I don't think our show ever feels high key. Like, I think it feels for, for a sitcom, like I feel like the show feels cinematic and looks cinematic. And, that certainly was my goal. But, it's the most color I've ever used. You know what I mean? Like I've
Yeah.
never worked with like such a vibrant color palette before. Like, I'm like you, like everything would be seven. Like I lean towards, um, drama, like character driven drama, that allows the cinematography to like to do like a little bit more of the heavy lifting, where maybe it doesn't need to be, um, maybe the story can be told in one shot as opposed to a lot of shots, so that was really exciting. And that was something like I really enjoyed about the collaboration was, getting outside of, how I've worked previously in my career and, and I loved it and I love it. I'm really, it's so interesting. This, Chioke's ideas about saturation and color and how like he wanted her, yeah, how he wanted Phoebe to pop out in the world. And that there was definitely a distinction from like her apartment to Brooklyn, and Brooklyn felt like a little bit more gritty and naturalistic. So that was cool. One of the biggest things too was zooms. Like I never used zooms before, and
Mm.
Chioke is all about zooms and like utilizing zooms where, you know, we'd have two cameras on the dolly on like, a 28 to 100 and like 80 to 220 or something, and hiding zooms and getting tighter and like having the movement just sort of move with the actors, and you're just hiding everything in the move of both the dolly and the actors. So there were a lot of things in this project that I'd never done before, um, that I loved, and I made the joke immediately, and I mean not joke, I was totally serious. Like I was like, I'm never not going to have like a short and medium zoom in my camera package now. So yeah, so that was something that was cool about the project.
Totally. In that pitch deck you sent me, which I did get. I forgot to I thought I
Oh, no
emailed you
problem,
back,
no problem, no
and I
problem, no
guess I
problem.
just went, "Oh, rad," and then went to whatever I was doing.
No sweat, no sweat.
Um,
I figured.
but in that pitch deck, like you mentioned, there's a lot of your personal photography, and I was wondering, New York, hard place to get. I think all the best, not the best, all these. When we think street photography, I think we tend to think New York.
Hmm.
And I wanted to kind of get your, I wanted to know more about how often you shoot photos. Like, do you have like a methodology behind it? Are you trying to be cinematic? Are you
Sure.
trying to be more like, James and Norris, or what is it? The Webbs,
Yeah.
Any
I mean,
influences you have photographically?
yeah, I mean, it was, I started to, when I went back, I decided to pursue this, I started to learn more about photographers and things like that. We're always looking at works of other photographers for inspiration. And, I think for me, um, part of it came out of dissatisfaction of where I was at
Mm.
and what my website looked like, honestly, and having like maybe projects that, um, not of projects that I felt were an expression of how I saw the world, as a cinematographer. So I think it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I added a photography component to my website, and I started shooting Fujifilm cameras. Like I had like
Yes.
I think I love them. I think I had there you go. I had the X100S was like my first camera,
This is the
and
V. Yeah.
I just got one. I finally got my hands
Oh,
on one.
fucking. Ah. I've been
They're
telling
hard to
everyone to
find.
get them, and they're like, supply chain, dude. They don't exist. Like,
They're the best. They're the best. But yeah, I simply added the photography component, and living in Brooklyn and living in New York, I just would go for a walk every day. When I wasn't working, I'd get outside. Like I never leave my apartment without my camera. And so stealing shots on the subway, like just seeing weird moments. And I just thought, well, here's a simple thing that I can update more regularly than my website, because we have to make a living.
Mhm.
Early in our conversation, you said like every project doesn't make it onto a reel, but we still are professional. We do the best job we can with every opportunity we're given. So for me, it was just a need to express myself. Um, you know, and I was framing everything in 235 initially to like just give it a little bit more of that, like, say like this is meant to feel cinematic. And I've gotten away from that now, but it was purely driven as a way I can update this more frequently, and people can get a sense of how I frame and um, how I like to photograph things, how I like to photograph the world.
Yeah, I'm so happy you said Fujifilm because I those cameras get brought up a lot, but I never asked this, and you get to be the first. I
Mm.
feel stupid. What's your little recipe? What do you go for in the Fujifilm?
What do you mean in terms of lenses and lensing,
No,
or
the Q menu. You know, you set up your little like film simulation. You know how you
I'm I'm such a dork. So I'm not. I don't get that deep. I shoot everything raw.
Oh, okay.
Um, I shoot everything raw, and then since I'm often shooting street photography, a lot of times I'm shooting from the hip. I'm trying to go low profile and unnoticed. Out of necessity, I set it to auto. So basically, I choose my shooting stop. I choose my aperture, and I just let the computer like do the exposure
Uh,
compensation with the shutter. And it's largely for me, it's just street photography. Like I love street photography, so it's like for me just trying to be unnoticed, listening to the music, stealing moments. And then I spend pretty much every morning when I'm not working, I sit down in front of my computer with a cup of coffee and I just grade photos on Lightroom. And it's nice, it's a nice exercise to just like go back, review things, um, think about composition. It's taught me a tremendous amount about color science in general,
mm.
and I think it's helped me in my collaborations with my colorists. So yeah, I think it's just like this simple thing. We're you know we can't always be shooting moving images. You know, then if you can't be doing that, then get the camera around your neck and get out there and shoot some pictures.
What makes a good street photo?
Oh man, shoot, I don't know. It's impossible to say. I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. It's just weird. I think it's just being okay. Well, for me, before I was ever a photographer, I was always into, I don't know, an observer. I was always an observer. I was always like kind of walking down the street, noticing weird things, noticing weird light, noticing weird situations. Maybe I'm like overly empathetic. Like, I don't know, like creating narratives off of like something that I see. I don't know. And I think what it is for me is just like living in New York, just sort of having your head on a swivel and just looking for opportunities. You know, there's one photograph that's on my website, um, and it was really simple, man. I went to Trader Joe's in downtown Brooklyn. I got onto the B train, cameras around my neck, standing there. The groceries are in between my legs, in between my feet, so they don't fly all over the train. And I look to my right, and there's this woman holding a white balloon. Her hand is like in a cast, and clearly she's just had an operation on her hands. I look to the person next to her, and it looks like her sister. And I'm just like, fuck, this is great. I just like my camera's always on, and I wake up the camera, and I just eyeball it the best I can. I snap a couple photos, you know, because I have it set to like 7 frames per second.
Sure.
And I get home, and it's just like beautiful image, and you know, the focus was perfect. And when I looked at that picture, it's like, all right, here's just this weirdness of New York. Like we all travel in these tubes underground together, going about our life. And I look at that picture, I'm like, all right, maybe she's got an operation. Her sister got her a white balloon to cheer her the fuck up. And it's just a weird, bizarre image because nobody else is noticing her except me. And the woman holding the balloon who just had the operation, I don't know, she's just like looking out the she's looking to her left out the subway window and just sort of is like staring off into the middle distance. I don't know, clearly thinking about something. So I don't know. I try to find something that resonates with me emotionally, and I'll take a picture of it.
Well, and that photo tells a story or begs a story.
Yeah, yeah, begs a story, or yeah, or you know, or just me as a viewer, like you may look at it and have a different interpretation. Exactly, but it makes you feel something.
Yeah, the way this might be self-deprecating, but the way that I can tell I've got a really good photo beyond just like, oh, the backlight's perfect, is
Yeah,
when I look at it and I feel like it looks like someone else shot it.
yeah.
Because you know how like because for anyone who doesn't do any like street photography or any kind of like documentary photography, you'll take about 1,000 pictures before you get
Oh
one that
yeah,
you want to show
oh
people.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I always think of those first 999 as my photography. And then that one that
Yeah.
really hits is like someone else did it. Someone
Yeah.
in the ether pulled that one out
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
dumped it
Yeah.
onto my camera.
But
Um,
but it is cool. Like, with street photography and cinematography, just, the more experience you have, and like, the sharper your eye gets, and like, there's, I don't know, there's this nice thing where, there's a technical craft, but ultimately we're working from an emotional base. Um, so it's nice when you can have like a creative idea, and it just sort of like crosses with the technical stuff, and you don't really think about it anymore, and you just sort of do it. You just sort of like let it happen, and that's nice. It's nice to
yeah.
like get there, and just, do whatever, just make images.
I'll give you a little tip that I learned. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
on the 100V, let's see, which profile is this? So I guess you would, if you're shooting raw, this wouldn't apply to you. But classic neg, that's on the.
Yeah.
So what
Yep.
I did is I got a warming filter, like just like a cheap
Okay.
Polaroid warming filter, and
Okay.
that seems to warm up the highlights. But whatever the color science is in the Fuji, the shadows stay cool, even in
Interesting.
JPEG, which is kind of nice. But then I found that the warming on the warm black Pro Mist is
Okay.
basically the same as the shitty Polaroid warming filter. So now I have that on here, and so I get a little bit
Oh,
of. It's just a 1/8. It's a very
okay, cool.
gentle, because I'm not
I'll
really
have
a
to try
Pro
that
Mist
out.
guy on cameras anymore.
Yeah.
I've kind of walked away from diffusion, but not totally. But
Yeah,
for photos, it's great.
I messed with it a little bit. I kind of fell in love with the oh my God, I just totally forgot the pearlescent. I really like the
Pearls are
pearlescent.
great.
I really like the eighth pearlescent. Like, I really don't go beyond a quarter, and it depends on how much backlight I have in the scene, of course.
Yeah.
But just something just to take the edge off of the digital image a little bit.
Yeah, it's always just something. That's what sucks is especially the Black Pro Mist got so popular that I like instinctively stopped using it. But then you'll get like a hard window somewhere, and you're like, well, I just kind of wish
Yeah.
that would roll off a little bit. I guess I got
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. Yeah.
like a glimmer glass, like a real gentle glimmer glass. Sometimes is
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little. It's nice.
Yeah, I never hit a 1. Get out of here.
No way.
So I saw. I think it was. Well, I won't mention his name. He's divisive, but he like carries up to a 9
Really?
in I think it was Black Pro Mist. It's like,
Wow.
what did you like commission Tiffin to make that for you? Like, that's not a
Wow. That's
thing.
crazy. That's crazy.
That's just putting like light diffusion in front of it, like like
Yeah, I
fucking
got it.
grid.
I mean, I would love to mess around a little bit more and just sort of experiment, because I definitely have friends that are kind of mad scientists, like, where they'll mess around with like, multiple diffusions and like varying, you know, uh, degrees or whatever, quarter, eighth, half, like, and they'll just come up with these like crazy, like mad scientist recipes, and it renders a really nice image. But I don't know, maybe, I don't know, I know, I love Deakins. Like, Deakins claims to like never use filtration, and for
Oh,
him,
you
it's
love
about
Deacons?
the
Who's
I
that?
love the Deak. Yeah, I bow at the altar of, I'm an acolyte of Deakins, yes. But
Sir
I
Roger.
love Sir Roger, but I love the fact that he, yeah, it's just about the quality of the light, he'd
Yeah.
rather
Oh yeah,
achieve
because
it
his
like in the
thing's always
quality
like
of the light.
super clean.
Yeah, super clean,
Master
man. It's like, yeah,
primes, nothing
yeah,
else.
master primes, nothing else. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's so cool how many different approaches. This is gonna get kind of airy fairy, I suppose, but it's like you want to think that you have a style, but we're all kind of dumping our styles into the same pool and
yeah,
borrowing from each other, and I find that kind of beautiful in a way. You
yeah.
know, you see, like Roger's rad, but you wouldn't always use his style, but you could,
Hmm.
building your own ring lights and stuff, and that's
Yeah,
something I do love about Roger's. How like simple, not simplistic, but like simple. A lot of
yeah,
he's like, well, I wanted a warm light, so I put a light bulb there. Oh, what'd you do to it? Nothing. It
yeah,
was just a light bulb.
yeah. Yeah, it's just sort of like, like a 2K blonde and some muzz, some unbleached muzz, like, staple it to the wall, like bang a hard light into it, and you have this beautiful, soft, warm light, like return, it's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
know. It's interesting. I mean, I love that, how like everybody, I think cinematography is very subjective, and when I think about teaching cinematography, like it terrifies me because I'm like, I don't know how to teach it. Like for me, it's a very personal thing. Like I don't know. I think you said. I think everybody's kind of like throwing their approach into this pot, and no approach is correct or incorrect.
It's going back to the punk rock idea. Like I find that the most interesting DPs are the ones who didn't weren't taught it necessarily. And this applies to almost any art form. When you learn super formally, you end up making really not formulaic. Well, maybe formulaic stuff. You make what's expected out of someone who was brought up in that system. But when you punk rock it and you just come from somewhere you never expected, you do things differently that no one who was taught would ever do. And those can sometimes be very interesting. You see it a lot in, no, I was going to say computer programming. That's not quite right. But, which is whenever an outsider comes in and tries something a lot, not always, but sometimes you can get something really interesting in there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, for my own experience, I was definitely, one of the greenest cinematographers for my year. And, the way I like to describe it is like that first semester at AFI, like I felt the water was up to here and I was just like treading as quickly as I could, and I remember hanging out at my friend Bobby Shore's house, super talented cinematographer, and just saying like, dude, what the fuck is like half CTS? Like, what's this quarter CTB? And like freaking out. And he's just like smoking a cigarette. And he's like, oh, dude, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And, and anyway, so I definitely got that amazing training at AFI, and like we had incredible classes with incredible cinematographers, and we definitely learned our craft. And whatever, to come back to this punk rock thing that you're mentioning, I had a great thesis director, this guy named Bo Yarrow, and kid from San Diego, like loves punk rock, and his thesis was about a girl in a small town in upstate California. She's kind of a surrogate mom to her younger siblings because her mom's a drunk, and like her only relief from this like pretty like miserable life is she sings in a punk rock band. And the basic story of the film is they open for a bigger band coming through, and just to make a decision, like because they get offered to finish the tour, they're like, do I leave or do I stay? And we had the budget for 35, and the director's primary references were this documentary about the Clash when they played like a week-long run of shows in New York City, and so I learned all this formalistic approach to lighting and cinematography, and we made an informed decision about like what's our story, what's the world. So we're like, fuck it, man, let's shoot on Super 16. I utilized movie lights, but I was largely using practical sources, like throwing like 213s into 150 watt bulbs into lamps, throwing them on dimmers. I was I was underexposing by 2 stops and like pushing it 2 stops in the grade to get grain. And on 16, like it's even dirtier.
That's thick grain, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really fun. It was really, really fun to like learn all these rules. Like, I mean, I think it's very important to, learn the gears, learn the tools, learn how to light, and then just throw it all away. Just throw it all away. I mean, it's good to have that, base to work from, but ultimately, you learn the tools and then you use the tools how you feel you need to, how you like to use them to tell a story.
Yeah, the way I've said it probably a million times on this if anyone's listened to like every episode of this podcast, which I do not know if anyone has, there's got to be like certain phrases that I say that are just like a fucking bingo card. Like, yeah, there's the one for this one. One of them is,
Let me
is like,
throw it away.
Yeah, no, something that I've said a million times that seems to resonate is like, to your point about teaching cinematography, you can't come up with cinematography in a vacuum. That's why every lesson is always like, well, here's 3-point lighting. Because it's like, that's about the vaguest or like the most specific concept you can tell someone. But without the script, how are you, there needs to be context. And then to your further point about throwing it away or whatever, Way more important, it seems, to go with what feels right than when
Yeah.
what is right. Now, obviously, you want things to be exposed and, you know, whatever, in focus and shit. But in terms of like your lighting setups or how the light's supposed to feel, whatever, like sometimes like just go with your heart. Like, I like
Yeah.
this better. Or, like, turn off a light. Everyone always says turn off a
Yeah.
light, but a
Yeah.
lot of times turn off a light, you know?
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. That guy I mentioned earlier, Bill Dill from AFI, like, another lesson. He's like, when you get lost, just, turn them off, turn the lights off, just start turning them off one by one. Less is more.
Yeah. I've kept you a little longer than I should have, so I'm going to have to let you go. But I end each podcast with the same two questions, but I've interviewed a lot more television people recently, so this first one
Okay.
doesn't quite work, and I'm going to have to come up with a different one at some
All
point.
right. All right.
But usually it's if you were to put your movie, or in this case your show, Everything's Trash, in a double feature, let's say, what would the other film or show be? Let's say it's a very long festival.
Oh, gosh. Geez. I don't know. That is, man, you may have stumped me. Fuck. I
It could be
honestly, I
anything.
don't know. Well, a double
Because it can also
feature.
be a counterpoint. I think only one person has picked a counterpoint to their like not
Well,
even a
okay,
counterpoint, like
maybe
a totally different thing.
I don't know. Maybe I'll pick an inspiration of like the show for like the costume designer for sure, in
Oh,
like some
sure.
of the words in some of the wardrobe, and I also think it's a comedy as well, and I think it's kind of interesting because our show's like incredibly vibrantly colorful in terms of its palette, but like Do the Right Thing, like it's just it's
Oh yeah, yeah,
Brooklyn
yeah.
in the same neighborhood, but it's black and white, and but still dealing with like very similar themes to comedy. So yeah, maybe Do the Right Thing could be an interesting thing to watch.
That's a great like immediately I'm co-signing that. That would be a great one. Hell yeah. That I actually I said this. Did I say this in Eric's interview? But they made us watch Do the Right Thing like
No, sorry, not
40.
Do the Right Thing. Sorry, not Do the Right Thing. She's got to have it.
Oh,
I
okay.
was
Fair.
saying
When you said black and white, I thought that was a.
she's got to have it black and white. But no, but then Do the Right Thing actually in terms of color was most definitely a reference. I can't believe you need to edit that. No, I'm
Okay,
kidding.
for sure.
I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm kidding. You don't need to edit that. But I would say she's got to have it because it's like definitely from like a woman's point of view, and the hero of the story, is the hero of our story is Phoebe, and so I think it's a contrast visually in terms of like a black and white to color, but clearly set in Brooklyn. But color in terms of color palette, like yeah, for sure, Do the Right Thing was most definitely a reference for our show because like the saturation of the colors is big in both.
Yeah. I just remembered it was Pete Chapman's interview where I was like, yeah, they made us watch
Okay.
Do the Right. They made us watch Do the Right in college. They made us watch Do the Right Thing like 100 times, and it made me hate it. And then it's
Really?
well, because like the first time I was like, oh, interesting, but a fucking young white kid from Northern California, like
Sure,
it didn't
sure.
quite get me. Like I didn't understand it, in the same way. I was like, why is everyone angry? Like that was my. But then after the 50th view, I was like, I'm so sick of this because I didn't want to like take it in. It took many years later for me to like go back and watch it without that like preconceived. But
Yeah.
Now
Ernest,
I'm like, oh yeah,
Ernest Dickerson, baby.
yeah, dude. Second question: is there a piece of advice or maybe something you've read or maybe a reference that you can share with people that has stuck with you over the years? Doesn't necessarily have to be about cinematography.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, well, maybe two things. Like
Lovely.
going back to Deacons. There was a book I read, a cinematography book, and there was like just a simple interview with him, and he was just like, "Be careful about the projects you choose, because Hollywood doesn't care about talent. They will often pigeonhole you, and they only look at what you've done on what your last project was in terms of your
Yeah.
filmography. So I think sometimes when you're first starting out, you want to shoot everything. And I think it's important to shoot everything and get as much experience, like build up your reel, build up that skill set. But I think you should be careful about the projects that you choose, and hopefully there's something that, at least for me, like I try to choose projects that I connect with emotionally. Like when I read the script, if I'm not feeling something, and if I can't see it, if I can't visualize it while I'm reading it, I'm not gonna do a good job as a cinematographer. So I shouldn't do that project. And then lastly, I don't know, just get up and go again. Like just get up every day, no matter what, and go again, and just keep working hard, and just keep showing up every single day. Don't worry about yesterday. Don't worry about tomorrow. Like all you have is today. I know it sounds so corny, but I don't know, like the more I've tried to just stay present and work hard every day, the easier things have got. There's no timeline. Like it's so the timeline of your career and your experience as a cinematographer in life is it's huge, and it's very hard to be objective, and it's really hard to kind of see it all. And you're going to fail and you're going to succeed, and and yeah, I don't know, you just have to learn from each experience and just get up and go again, and just keep trying, because there's a lot of classmates I went to school with, and and it's super competitive, and it's hard, and you're going to get discouraged. And I certainly got discouraged many, many, many times. But I just had a little inkling of a belief that, maybe I could do this. It's the one thing I don't think I've ever been more passionate about anything. So yeah. So my advice is, if you want to do this, don't compare yourself to anybody. Get up every day, do your thing, and just keep going, and see where you end up.
Well, and ending with Sir Roger, if you don't have a career by whatever 30, I mean, Roger Deakins is working into his 60s, so
yeah,
you got a long way to go.
Dude,
you're fine.
If there's like a super young cinematographer out there listening, I went to AFI when I was 31. I graduated when I was 33. I've been a full-time cinematographer since I was 38. I'm 49 years old. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like just get after it. And choose projects that you're passionate about. Try to work from an emotional and empathetic base. And just don't compare yourself to anybody. Just keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic way to end it, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Like I said, your commercial work's great. The show's great. You're doing great. Everyone's great.
Thanks, man.
I really appreciate you spending the time and chat with me. That was a lot of fun.
Kenny, I really enjoyed this, man. Thank you.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F at our Matbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.